people that have acquired a lot of things realize that getting the actual thing isn't where it's at. It's the journey and who you've become. And I think you've had such an incredible journey of all of these different things that I don't know that you would be the same person you are right now before you actually acquired and done all of these things.
No, because I know that I can only go as high as I've gone low.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gone through some really meaningful lows. Understand that just because that thing happened, it doesn't mean that you're this way or that way or you can't achieve stuff. We just got to kind of reassociate, like you've been sharing with people. It's like the meaning you're giving those things are not supporting you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you work on you, then it's just, you got more to give. And you're right. I will 100% do more for other people than I'll ever do for myself.
All right, everyone, I am so excited for you to tune in with us for another episode of the Candy Valentino Show as you get to listen in to this conversation with my guest today, Dan Martell. Thanks so much for joining us.
Candy, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I feel like we had a little bit of a conversation before we even started. So I want to unpack for everyone watching and listening today, because people see you have a book and they might follow you on social and see all the things you did. But what I find obviously very inspiring for most people is for them to know a little bit about who the entrepreneur was in the buildup to become who they are today.
Totally.
So I know you bootstrapped some things, you failed at a few startups. Can you share a little bit about your journey when you started and kind of what your experience has been in?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people, we have these long stories and then we kind of retell them so that they're short and concise. But I mean, I grew up in a really challenging environment, ended up addicted to drugs as a teenager. Prison first time when I was 15, ended up again there when I was 16, and eventually got released to a rehab center that literally saved my whole life. Like this place is called Portage. It was an 11-month program where I learned about the stories, the meaning. I mean, honestly, Candy, it was like the best personal development program I didn't know I needed at the time. And it was at the end of that program, I was helping Rick, the maintenance guy, clean out one of the cabins on site. It was built on an old church camp. And I discovered this old computer and a yellow book on Java programming sitting next to it. I literally started the computer up and followed chapter 1 of this book. And 20 minutes later, I got the computer to say, "Hello world." And I was like, "Oh, this thing works," you know? And that became kind of the new addiction. So I kind of got sober then, ended up becoming obsessed with software. And I'd love to tell you that I had success right out of the gates. It was in 1998. So
I was just going to say, it sounds like late 90s with the computer.
So I discovered this little thing called the internet. Turned out to be kind of a big deal, but I just didn't know anything about business. So I just kept, building tools, building websites, building apps. And it took me I was 17 when I started building my first company. That was a vacation rental site, which sounds Airbnb, VRBO, should have been a huge success. Unfortunately, I didn't know what I was doing, so failed. Did another company a couple of years later, failed. I remember my dad saying, like, maybe you should just get a job. I'm like, I'm unemployable. Like, I could never do that. And like, when I say like full on, this is not side hustle. This is like all in. And it was on the third attempt, 17, 23 years old. So 6 years of trying and trying and trying, that I finally hired a business coach, this guy named Bob. And it was crazy. Bob taught me the other 95% of the stuff that I didn't even consider as a software programmer. And within our first year, we did almost $1 million. But it required me to become way more than who I was at the time, because I realized that if I want more out of life, that I have to become more, right? And unfortunately, and the reason why I wrote this book, that third company that finally succeeded, I was so scared that I would fail that I became a horrible brother. I was a bad son. I wasn't a good friend at all. I'd go to birthday parties and sit there on my laptop, working on contracts, sending emails, full parties going on around me. And I think I'm like the best person in the world because I'm so busy, but here I am. And I was engaged to a woman, and 7 weeks before the wedding, I come home and she's in tears and she just says, "I'm done. I can't do this anymore." And she walked out the door and went and lived with her parents, and that was the last time we were together. So I've had the ups and the downs, and I had to find a better way to do it, or I was going to be stuck being, honestly, I was worried I was going to have to be just the cool uncle. Probably shouldn't be in a relationship. Probably shouldn't have kids for sure. And when I look at my life today, where I've got a beautiful marriage and 2 little boys, like, I'm glad I did the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, huh?
It's still a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean, I still wake up every day going like, would I have listened to me at 15 years old?
Mm.
Like, there's this great quote that says, become the person you needed most in your darkest days.
Yeah.
And that's what I strive to be. I do it for, my family. I wanted to break that addiction that was part of my parents. My mom was adopted, her parents were alcoholics, and so I understand where they came from.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to at least be the generation, my family, to stop that, to stop propagating it. So it took a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you touched on something in their story that I want to just point out for everyone listening or watching, is that sometimes when we have one addiction, we try to get a better life and replace it with something else. And it turns into typically destination addiction, right? I've been there. So when you were saying the laptop at the party, I'm like, oh, I know exactly what that looks like, because that was me. And then I would feel proud of myself that I wasn't watching the television and doing all this stuff. I was still working towards my goals. But then you actually miss out on so much life. And I think that when you're in your early 20s or even 30s, you don't realize that until you're probably a little bit older.
Yeah.
In retrospective, right? The wisdom. But I also love how you touched on that Airbnb type company, because I think it's important for entrepreneurs that have had failures in their life to realize that sometimes it's not you. It actually wasn't you. It wasn't the idea. Like, the idea was there because now we have Airbnb and VRBO, but it might've been the wrong time. It might've been the wrong product. It might just not have been who you needed to be to bring that to market. When you look back at that first failure, do you think, you know what, I wasn't equipped to do that?
I know exactly what it is in hindsight. I didn't plan to win. I'll tell you why. So I started this thing. It's called maritimevacation.ca. My dad had a cottage, a little place that, he would rent out during the summer to help pay for it. And he'd get those calls. Anybody in real estate, is it available? How far is it from the beach? And, it's 97, 98. And I go, I think I could build the site so that you don't have to answer these calls anymore. Mm-hmm. And so he gives me a couple $100. I needed the server to host the site. And I just kept building. And I remember I was trying to get customers. And my buddy Dave goes like, I think there's like a magazine that has all the bed and breakfasts in it. And I was like, where is this thing? He's like, the tourism board has it. And I was like, oh. So then I found this man. It literally had the addresses of every bed and breakfast. So I paid my little brother Mo $3 an hour to type it into a Microsoft Access database, and did a mail merge with Microsoft Word and printed out all these letters. And I just send it out. And I said, if you want a web page, send me $30 and some pictures and I'll scan them in. And
love it. Direct mail.
And I remember the day my dad came back, we were living in this apartment, and he gets the mail and there's a stack. And he just looks at me and he calls me Danielle. He goes, what did you do? And I was like, oh, it worked.
Oh my gosh.
And that was what was important for me, even though it didn't in the long term win.
Yeah.
It taught me how to make $1 off the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, anybody that builds something and puts it out there for somebody to buy from you, and it's not your uncle or your family member, your best friend, and you make $1 on the internet, that's the day you've gone pro. And that planted a seed inside of me of like the excitement of what could come from this. Now, I didn't plan for success, and the guy who started at thecottage.com did. So he had a .com at the cottage. He had a team. He was dedicated to this. I was doing it as like a side thing. I was still in high school at the time. And so, eventually my customers ended up leaving. And that was just like this moment. I said, well, when I decide to do something next time, I'm going to at least plan for success. I'm going to plan that this is going to work. I'm not going to play not to lose. I think that's a big thing you hear in business often, is like, be on the offense, not defense. Like, always push, always grow. Because if you're doing things out of fear, which I was doing the least amount of effort to not risk anything, then the person that's willing to show up and invest in a better domain, or invest in a better brand, or invest in anything, they're going to compete against everybody else that's playing not to lose.
Yeah, I love that. I love the offensive thinking about that. What do you think? Was it just that, or was there anything else that you intentionally did from the first and the second failure as you went into the third build?
The second one, I started a web hosting company. We ended up getting a bank as a customer, which sounds crazy.
Wow.
I partnered with my brother. He was a sales guy, looked the part, fast talker, all those things. And I was the tech guy in the server room, like literally spent my time, installing software and making sure the emails got sent and all that. And he got the bank. And I was nervous, And he was like, can you handle it? He's a sales guy. He doesn't even know. He's like, can you do it? And I'm like, I think so. And we ended up porting their whole website to our system. And I remember it was like a Sunday afternoon and my brother's calling me and it's like, John from the credit union's freaking out and they said the site's down and my heart sank and I ran over to the server room and like trying to get myself in there and we got hacked.
Oh.
And and I was like trying to like unplug wires and like I didn't know what was going on. So it was like unplug the cable and then the power and that was, unfortunately it didn't end well and we ended up having to shut the company down. And we had no money. And the reason why is we had a lot of customers, but we weren't making any money. So that second business, I learned the value of margins. Okay. So a lot of people get into business and they might have the revenue and this, I love this is your world. and they're all excited and when you ask them how your company goes, they say, well, we got 13 employees. Don't know why that matters, but that's cool. Or, we did $1 million in revenue. It's like, okay, but how much you keeping, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And that was the moment where I realized like I worked way too hard to make zero money. At the end of it, we were 20 grand in debt. We each had to write off these lines of credit. And I just said, okay, if I'm going to build something, I'm going to figure out how do you fight to be the top, right? Not the bottom. There's always going to be a low cost leader, right? The Walmarts. That's just not a place. That's not where you can create a great company, a great brand. You literally start to be like, there's value there. You're priced appropriately, but over time you want to get the service better and better and better. So that was that lesson I learned in the second company is don't sell commodities, right? Like you could probably make a lot of money selling salt. I don't want to do it that way.
Yeah.
Like it's just not, that's why.
It's hard. It's so hard that way. Like it's hard for Walmart to be Walmart. That's why there's hardly any in that competition as far as like, cause it's really hard to dominate the bottom.
It's crazy. And it's a volumes game. And honestly, it's just not interesting. Do you want to be Walmart? Do you want to be Tiffany's? Do you want to be, the other Walmart or do you want to be Apple? Right. So like, I just have always built companies where I'm like, I want to be the best in the category and I'm willing to invest in it and deliver the service and the experience, all that stuff. Now, the big thing that finally came together for me on my third company was realizing that if I just keep doing the same thing I'm doing, I'm just going to get the same results, which is the definition of insanity. And I remember I was driving to go meet my potential new business partner. Okay. I was like, okay, I need a business partner. I had this guy who was 10 years older than me. His name was Clark. I'm in Ohio at the time doing some freelancing. He lived in Baltimore. So I got this long drive. It's Friday afternoon. I'm going to meet him. We're going to strategize for the weekend. We're going to come up with the new business. And my buddy Corey calls me up and he goes, I know you like to read a little bit. There's this book I just read called The E-Myth. And I think you'd like it. Now I'm ADHD, have a hard time reading. So I bought this audio CD. I went to the local bookstore and luckily they had it there. And I just drove listening to Michael Gerber talk to me about Sarah's Pies and the franchise prototype. And by the time I got there, I was like, Clark, like, this is what we're missing. We got to build the business this way because if not, we're not going to build a company that's valuable and we're going to feel like prisoners to our business. He's like, yeah, we'll get to it. Like, let's talk strategy. Let's talk about, I got this partner. I want you to meet him tomorrow. Let's get ready for that meeting. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, this is how I want to build it. I honestly don't want to talk about anything until you listen to this book. And he just dismissed it. And I decided, you know what? When I was driving back on Sunday afternoon, he's not the guy. So I went and found a business coach. This guy, Bob, he was a E-Myth certified coach. Now I'm 23, no business. And I said, well, what's the cost? And he goes, it's only $1,500 a month US for 2 calls a month.
Wow.
I got no money.
And this was what, 20 years ago?
And I'm Canadian.
Yeah.
That's real money. That's right. That's not. So I was like, I just don't want to make the same mistake again. I'm a software guy. I know the product. I know the service well. Like I can deliver. If I can get a customer, I can figure that out. But there's this whole other area of business I just do not understand. And Bob was that mentor. He was that, in many ways, an older brother to me that kind of showed me where to put my hands and my feet as I'm trying to like figure out how to build this thing and crawl out of this hole I'd created for myself. And that was probably when I took mentorship and coaching seriously. And since then, I have an unlimited budget for my health and my personal development. Yeah. And it's been a big impact on my life. Yeah, because it pays dividends, really. And that's why I think you can't measure it in the moment, right? People try to measure that in the moment. But even think about the $20 or whatever it was to buy the audiobook. Like you can't measure that ROI then because you don't know what it's going to do compounding over time. But when you really look back, it's like that was a pivotal moment
that was really worth probably $1 million because of the course that it put you on. Same thing with Bob.
Yeah.
Right? And I want to touch back. You talked about basically this, being best in class, being the Ritz-Carlton instead of the Walmart, I always call it, or instead of the Super 8. But I do feel like in this world of social media that there is a lot of people preaching, and you may disagree, and that's okay, but I feel a lot of people are preaching this: charge what you're worth, raise your prices, and they just charge the most, but don't really take the time to develop a company and a brand and value in order to deliver that. Is that something that you believe, or do you feel that in your fulfillment that you have to be able to build the value for the customer to be best in class?
Well, I believe a lot of stuff about pricing because it's a big area I work with clients on. A few things, like generally speaking, men are overly confident about what they're worth and women undercharge. Like that's just data points when I look at it. And so I think everybody should raise their prices, but at the same time, they should ask themselves, like, what's the value I'm bringing, right? So I always do the 10X. It's like, if whatever I'm charging somebody, I got to be able to correlate that within the first 30 days, I'm generating that kind of ROI. And most people that are selling coaching services, agency stuff, they don't even really know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Like some of them had success, and great, they might have had success. But once you're lucky, twice you're good, 3 times you're great. And I think most people get lucky and then think they found the magic pill, but it's not. They actually don't understand it. That's why when you hear somebody like yourself speak about the finance stuff and the business stuff, like you can tell they're seasoned, they've done this, they've gotten the scars. And so, yeah, generally speaking, I think most people, let's say the majority, don't charge as much as they should, but at the same time, they don't think of their business through the same lens of how much value am I creating for people. Mm-hmm. Here's another way to think about it. I like to think about it is most people wake up every day to try to figure out how can I do the least amount of effort to make the most money. I would encourage people to consider asking themselves, how can I create the most value for my customer than anybody else in the world? Mm. And I think that's the difference from the entrepreneurs and the real entrepreneurs. Yeah. See a lot of people coming into space and they literally wake up and they're like, what's your hack? What's your strategy? How do I automate the whole thing and have no, and I'm like, no, don't do that. Like actually ask yourself, like, what's the best experience for the customer so that you can absolutely knock it out of the park? And I think that, as you talk about brand, long-term, we only got 2 things. We got our reputation and we have our reach. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have a good reputation, let's hope you don't have big reach because that's not good.
Exactly.
And if you don't have a good reputation, build one and then figure out how you can get as many people to know about it. And, then I think the prices move up with those 2 elements.
That's good. And I love how you touched on that you think men overvalue and women undervalue. And it's
men
so
think
interesting.
They should be billionaires by this afternoon.
and always be able to travel and work from the beach and have everybody else do it, right? I've seen that. But it's interesting. We just had this conversation in the car on the way here because I see that so often. Men that maybe have had 1 or 2 success in something, but definitely don't have the experience, haven't done the reps or have the scars, if you will. And yet I feel like walking into a room that they automatically look at, we could walk into the same room and automatically, without us opening our mouths, they would assume that you're the business guy, you're the one that knows everything. And I often wonder, how do you change that? Like, I know you have sons, right? You don't have daughters.
Boys,
And I often think of like daughters that are coming up. I don't think it'll be as difficult as when I started in 1999 and people were like, where's your husband? But what do you think it is about women? Is there anything that maybe even with you working with other founders, like that you've been able to help coach them to get past that?
So much good stuff there. So I coach more than 50% of my clients are women. Mm. And I love it. My wife, I mean, she's taught me being in a relationship with an incredibly talented, driven woman has really given me front row access to like see how those experiences, right? And trust me, if you say that to my wife, she will, she's her own boss. If you think she works for me or blah, 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 I don't want to be there when you ask her that. But I do love it because, I mean, most of my executive staff are women. I love the feminine energy, especially when it comes to people and the creative stuff. Like, it's awesome. But I think the things that come up is, I'll talk about one of the big ones, especially as it pertains to buying back your time. Mm-hmm. Most women are driven by the fear of what their mom's going to think. Mm-hmm. And as a professional woman, considering hiring somebody to help clean your house, that I know for my wife, that was a big thing she had to go through about a dozen years ago, right? Where she was worried what her mom was going to think. There's the even more, you know, around with children, right? Like I remember I had a board meeting. We just had our first son, and one of my investors goes, "Did you get a night nanny?" I said, "What is this magical person you talk about?" Because it'd been a couple weeks of sleepless nights.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh no, dude, you need a night nanny." And I was like Googling it, found the person, introduced to my wife, and she's just like, "I don't know why, but I just feel so guilty having somebody else." You know? And I said, well, let's just try it for a week. And if you don't like it, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
And within a day, she was like, that was the best. Like literally, baby wakes up, brings it to my wife breastfeeds, takes the baby, burps it, puts it to sleep, and paying attention for the whole night, which allowed her to sleep better.
Why do you think that? Because, okay, the first time I don't have kids, but the first time I heard a friend of mine, Desiree, talk about she had a night nanny and a day nanny. And I was like, same thing. I'm like, I've never even heard of that. She goes, oh yeah, they sleep train them. They do all of this, because she had to get up and run a company the next day. And I remember thinking, if I ever have kids, that's what I'm doing. And same thing. I heard so many, oh, why would you even have them then? You know, what do you think that is?
I think people get their worth, their personal self-worth from the wrong things. So I think most self-worth and confidence should come from keeping the commitments we make to ourselves in private. Let's just focus on that as where does your confidence come from? Discipline. By saying I'm waking up at 5 a.m. and you don't hit the snooze button. And every time you do that, you're reinforcing that confidence. Versus a lot of people, their confidence comes from external factor. Moms, is my child behaving? And if they're not behaving, then they consider the world thinks they're bad moms. My child laying on the middle of the mall floor, freaking out, whatever, has for me, me personally, I don't have any, I don't go, I'm a bad dad. I go, my child is having some feels.
Yeah.
And I'm cool. And I'm going to hold space for him. And I'm not going to cave in. And we're going to go through this together because he's 5. And I'd rather deal with this at 5 than wait till he's 15. Just saying. Because my boys are going to be big boys. I'm like, we're going to work on this when the monster's small, not when it's big. And I think that a lot of it is that. It's the messy house, right? It's I got to be on top of everything, you know? And it's also I know why, because I want to be a better husband to my wife. I study all the books on like how women think. And I literally saw this happen in real time last night where there's 2 conversations going on. One, a woman was telling the rest of the group about the day, and the other one was a man. People don't understand is like evolutionary speaking, women used to go out into the meadow and pick berries. Okay. It's why, Candy, I don't know if you know this, but I'm assuming if I ask you to see your purse, do you have a little purse inside your big purse?
Not today, but sometimes.
But you know what I'm talking about, right? You have the little purse.
Yeah.
And then if I went around and asked the men, show me your wallets, they'd pull out these thin.
Yeah.
Why is that? Like it's people lie, numbers don't.
Yeah.
And it's because of the way it worked. Before, men used to go out and they would hunt. Well, they only brought the thing they needed to hunt.
Yeah.
Their little skinny wallet, right?
And we needed all these things.
You needed all this stuff in berries. And then when you came back, it's actually like a psychological concept called meta reports. At the end of the day, I lay in bed, my wife's there, and I go, babes, tell me about your day. Here's the cool part. I don't have to remember anything. I don't even have to respond. I can literally just go, oh, cool. What else? This, It's a meta report, because back then, if you didn't communicate the right berry on this tree next to the thing, the leaves green, but not really that dark green. It's a light green. It's got fuzzy on it. It's not the waxy type leaves. If somebody accidentally picked the wrong berry and brought it back into the home, then the whole family could get poisoned.
Wow.
So this is actually based in our biology, not our psychology.
Yeah.
Right. So there's been a lot of books written about this concept. And I think that if you understand that, then it makes everything else make a lot of sense about how people show up today. Doesn't make it right. It just does. I love your idea of saying, how in the future could somebody show up in a room where people give them the exact same respect as a male and there's no assumptions, because there shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think, honestly, women are better entrepreneurs. Like they got the people side, which most men will never figure out.
Yeah. I think we also can really manage a lot of things at once.
Yeah. It's called diffuse focus, another concept written in these books. Yeah. And we think it's funny because the woman who wrote the book, I forget her name, but it's called Understanding Women. She says that most men don't understand how when they watch their wives work in the house where it goes like boom, boom, boom. So but that's actually, there is no single purpose task. Whereas a man is like, okay, I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to build the fence, but I don't have the drill. So until I get the drill, I can't start the fence.
Yeah.
Whereas a woman's like, I'm going to clean this, I'm going to start the laundry, I'm going to do this. And it's actually how their mind works. We think there's something wrong with that, where it's actually a superpower.
Yeah, that's wild. Diffused focus.
Diffused focus.
What book? Do you remember what book that was in?
I think it was called Understanding Women, and her name is Linda something.
I have to look that up. That's fascinating. So if you were giving someone, because you obviously 50% of your clients, I know probably 50% of our audience is females. If you had to just say a few things in order for them to either value their services more or show up in a room, do you have any little pieces of advice that you coach?
I just listen to my heart. First thing that came up is I wanted to tell them that they're enough. There's no place to get to. You get this. Like, this is why I love talking to you about it. You know, I was working with this woman entrepreneur and I said, what's the goal? She goes, sell for 100 million. So where are you at now? She's like, 2 million revenue. I said, cool. So there's some work to do. I said, but why do you want to get to 100 million? And she goes, because then I'll be able to tell them F you. I said, who? She goes, the doubters. I said, do you know how rare you are that you're doing 2 million in top line revenue, that you started this company? No external support? No.
Less than 2%.
Let's Google it.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, so it's less than 2%.
Yep.
What are you waiting for?
Yeah.
And I saw her get emotional. I said, let's stay there. Because to me, that was what I wanted her to realize. There was no place for her to get to. There was no future that she needed to achieve to give herself the gift of realizing in this moment, you're enough.
Yeah.
And what's fun as somebody that's helping entrepreneurs build companies is that from that place, it's actually turns from a dark energy to a light energy, right? From a push to a pull. And I'd say that would be the first thing that came on my heart. What do I tell them? I would tell them that they'll never make a penny more than they think they deserve. And I would encourage them to consider that they deserve a lot more, that they're worth a lot more, that they undervalue their skills. Like, my wife is one of the most creative, artistic, like everything she touches, no different than you can. I see this set, I see, how you put things together. And yet she thinks it's bad. She sees the flaws in it. And I'm looking at it in the awe of it all. And I just think sometimes, because maybe the feedback she's getting from her family and her friends isn't the same feedback that she would hear from me, nor do I know maybe she's open to hear it, right? Because I think sometimes the people closest to us are too close to see our greatness. And I would love to tell everybody listening that I think that if you put a lot of stake and value in your mom's opinion of your work or how you're showing up at home, or your neighbors and the other women in your neighborhood, and maybe they don't have a business and they judge you because they see a cleaning person out in your driveway and they think, oh, you're so busy, you don't have time to take care of your own home. I would argue they're way too close. They don't see your greatness. And I think it's kind of sad that the people that know us best sometimes support us the least.
It's true.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when those judgments, so if anyone's listening and they're like getting hit in the heart on that, I think a lot of those judgments happen because you're triggering lack in some way. And maybe they're not identifying it as like, oh, I wish I had a cleaning person or a night nanny, but there's a little bit of lack that turns into envy. And then rather than them realizing that they can just go out and change anything that they want in their life, and they can do this too if they do the work, have discipline, and take the action, it's a lot easier to talk about you having it than to go out and do it.
Yeah,
right?
I'd rather criticize and own
that's
the fact
so much
that
easier, right? Type something on a computer, text someone, call someone. But the work that it takes to be disciplined over time and take the action in spite of all of those opinions is hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. And I think as of like starting in the late 90s, like it was really rare. But I read that stat that less than 2% of all female entrepreneurs hit more than 2 million in revenue. And I'll never forget the first time I walked into WPO, Women's Presidents Organization. You had to do over 2 million to get a seat. I barely got a seat at the table. And I remember thinking, at that moment, you can decide, well, 98% of people don't do it. But what about the 2%? It's like somebody's got to be in the 2% to make the stat. But I think that our net worth will never grow beyond our self-worth. And I think we have to do a lot of deep diving in order to really identify that who you are now, male or female, is enough. And like, you don't have anything to prove, right? Like, I think that's, for me, I see a lot of entrepreneurs trying to prove who they are and what they're
through
worth.
external possessions, through
Exactly.
external achievements. And then they get them. And then we all get to the place where we go, oh, I thought this money would make me happy. And it turns out I still got to look at me in the mirror.
That's right.
And the money only amplified who I was. And guess what? I didn't like myself very much.
Yeah.
And
It's
they
like
didn't.
when you, do you ever buy, I mean, your first, do you remember your first fancy car?
Fancy car?
Did you buy, what was your
McLaren?
McLaren.
Yeah.
Did it feel as good a month or a year later as it did that first day?
No, the first day was like emotional. It comes out of the thing. I like recorded the whole thing. I was like telling the guy who delivered it off the truck, I was like, do you know what's in the back? He goes, I know what's in the back. I was like, isn't this so cool? And he was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you got one. It was the first one in the province I grew up in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just, and you're right. Like by the third month, it's like I was just driving, going to the gym.
It's just another car.
Yeah, it was just a car.
Yeah. The fascinating thing I've seen about wealth, though, is like I've had those moments too, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I did this or I bought this. And then those first few days, and then it kind of fades. The one thing I've found is when you do it for someone else, it tends to last a little longer.
Yeah.
And I don't know, with having kids, maybe that's, you know, for you, what you do for your kids. But I find it interesting that people that have acquired a lot of things realize that the thing, getting the actual thing, isn't where it's at. It's the journey and who you've become. And I think you've had such an incredible journey of all of these different things that I don't know that you would be the same person you are right now before you actually acquired and done all of these things.
No, I know that people ask me all the time, like, you know, what would you change? Nothing.
Yeah.
Because I know that I can only go as high as I've gone low.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gone through some really meaningful lows. I'm just grateful I met people like Bob and others that were like, hey, I need you to understand that just because that thing happened, it doesn't mean that you're this way or that way or you can't achieve stuff. We just got to kind of reassociate, like you've been sharing with people. It's like the meaning you're giving those things are not supporting you, right? And if you work on you, then it's just, you got more to give. And you're right. I will 100% do more for other people I'll ever do for myself.
Yeah. And I think once you get to that, that's when you really develop a rich life. Yeah.
It's fun.
Let's bring it back for entrepreneurs, because I feel like we could have a conversation inside of this all day long. If entrepreneurs are listening, or people that are investing in businesses or in real estate, because I have a lot of that as well, what are just a couple pieces of advice that you would give? Somebody's looking to scale. Maybe they've done their first few million, but you know, as we know, going for your first few million to going to 10 or going to 100 is a lot difficult. You need a whole new set of skills. Totally. What are some things that you would share, just advice for them? Yeah,
well, I've worked with so many entrepreneurs at every level that I've seen these natural, what I call complexity ceilings, right? And the one that is the hardest because it requires faith is the 2 to 10 million, right? That 7 to 8 figure leap, and the skill, right? And it's an art that you'll never probably master, but the skill that's missing, that's different from, 0 to 2 million, is the ability to learn to work through people. Because Candy, we've all been there where like you are now the person that manages the people that have a team that talk to the customer. And for you to actually grow and become an owner, not an operator, it requires for you to let go.
Yeah.
And there are some feels and some little T traumas and sometimes some big T traumas that come up in those moments where you get the call and somebody's unhappy and you want to jump in. Oh,
devastating. It's like a knife.
I know. It's like, what? Who said that to them? And why did you guys?
Yeah.
Like you didn't check the thing. And some people never make that journey, right? It's also financially, as you know, because you have to invest ahead of your growth with the people. So you got to go from like anybody with a pulse to people that come with playbooks.
Yeah.
You're paying a different level for that type of talent. So like that 2 to 10 million, you've got to be okay coming down a little bit on the profitability to bring in the talent to then eventually build to the next level. That's a big one. You have to build the engines of growth, right? You need a predictable way to generate leads. You need a process for converting those leads, and you have a way to onboard customers to get them to experience value as fast as humanly possible. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are so busy trying to replenish, the bucket and put more people in the top. They don't look at all the people leaving every month. And it's actually a math problem. If you tell me how many customers you have, how many you add every month, how many you're losing every month, and what you charge on average per month, I will tell you to the day when you will hit your growth ceiling. It's a math problem.
Yeah.
So people that are stuck in that couple million in revenue, it's who do I need to become as a leader, right? John Maxwell says, the business will only grow to the level, as you mentioned, in the growth of the leader. So it's always a people problem, right? My philosophy in the book, I talk about this, is we build the people build the business, right? Like, this is a funny one. How many coaches spend 90% of their time coaching clients and no time coaching their team?
Yeah.
It fascinates me,
Yep.
right? I had a friend of mine once, he was complaining about his team. And he's like, they don't participate in meetings and they don't think strategically and they're not very productive and they drop the ball on emails and they do all this stuff. I go, okay, make a list of sounds like you got a list in your head. What are all the things that upset you about your team? And I said, you got the list? He goes, yeah. I said, cool. Show me on that list, when's the last time you trained your people on those things? Mm-hmm. 0. Crickets. He didn't say anything. I said, let's start with that. Yeah. So to me, I think a lot of people at that level, that 2 to 10 million, it's formalizing your talent acquisition, talent development, talent retention strategy, because it really comes down to people, and then building those engines of growth. And all that really means is, how do I learn how to work through people? Because somebody said once, they go, what if you hire them, train them, and they leave? And I go, what if you hire them, don't train them, and they stay?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, good point. I'm like, all right. But that's what I would say to people is that at that level, you got to be okay with the profit coming down a little bit, but it's a reinvestment in people that allows you to get to that next level. And then after that, like business actually gets really fun after 8 figures. I know for some people they're struggling. They're like, I would just like to make 100 grand. I get that. But if people are on that journey, I would just say fight and show up and develop yourself to get to that level, because after that, it then becomes a place where you get to work with great people, working on really fun problems, creating cool solutions.
Well, I think it's what you talked about and what we just shared is from 2 to 10, it's who you're becoming. Because you don't, the skill set that it takes for you to do your first million, your first 2 is really all about you. Like, you need the grit, you need the drive, you need to focus on growth. But then in order for you to continue, you got to almost completely drop everything that you were just good at. And you got to start all over again. And you got to be a strong leader, and you got to be, developing processes, which a lot of entrepreneurs don't even know because they've just been operating off of instinct.
Yeah.
So they haven't been building the processes to even know how to train a staff when they hire them, or even what their customer acquisition strategy is. It's like, oh, well, we have customers. Okay, well, where did they come from and how much did it cost you? To know if you have a good product and you can fulfill it and you have retention, well, now we just need to go get more customers. Like, it actually gets really simple, but if you don't build those foundational blocks or growth engines, as you called them, you're just going to be on a whim and a prayer constantly, and you're never going to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, and that's what scares most people is like, somebody asked me the other day, they're like, how do you sleep? I said, well, I wear an Oura ring, so I know how I sleep. But they're like, you ever have sleepless nights? And I go, not anymore at this level. I can tell you all
before.
And I can tell you why, and I can tell you about the fact that I got shingles because I was stressed out. My body's like, hey, this ain't cool. And, the anxiety attacks and all that stuff. I've gone through it all. But to your point, if I can just slow down a little bit to document the systems, to create the processes, to invest in the people, sometimes it feels slow, but it's how you go fast.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about your book, because your story when you were 23, 100 hours, working at all the parties, that was me for a long time. But I wore it like a patch. Like, I was pretty proud of it. Yeah, like,
high performer.
Yeah. Like, and to me, it was like, well, this is what I love. Like, I actually love being an entrepreneur. So I don't feel like I'm burning out until I then burn out or crash. And so I actually just went through something like that again. Because like I was saying, after my last exit, I kind of came on the scene. Well, then you're in startup mode again, in a sense, like building all of this. And I found myself going right back into those old habits. So anyone that's listening, that's been doing this for a long time, they realize that they're one of these people that are just perpetuating working all the time. How can they start to take steps to really buy back their time?
Yeah, so here's my philosophy. The Buyback Principle states is that we don't hire people to buy back our time. We don't hire people to grow our business. We hire people to buy back our time.
100%.
Because if we do the first, we don't get the second. And if we do the second, we get the first. So and people are like, what did he say?
So good.
Hire people to grow our business? No. Hire people to buy back our time? Yes. And the way I do that is this framework called the buyback loop. And there's 3 steps to it. Whenever you hit the pain line, and most entrepreneurs will not grow into pain. If I put a knife to your throat and I said, step forward, nobody's doing it.
Mhm.
So if you have opportunities, and they happen all the time to entrepreneurs where they have an invite to speak on a stage that could double their business, or a key hire that freaks them out that could triple their business, but then they're worried, well, if I actually grew, then my calendar would explode.
Mhm.
So most people, when they hit what I call the pain line, they'll either sell, I want to go do something else. I heard drop shipping better, real, or whatever.
Yeah.
They just like new vehicle, sell, stall. I don't want to grow anymore. I'm good. This feels good. I understand it now. Problem is the market's growing. And the worst part is your best team members, if they don't feel like there's a future, they're going to go find somebody else and give them a better future.
Mhm.
And then the third is sabotage. And the sabotage one is interesting. It's dragging your feet, replying to an email. It's, what I call throwing hand grenades into our business, right? Because we like chaos. It's like, that feels comfortable. But it's really just ground cover to give you an excuse not to grow, because it would be painful. So when you feel the pain line, you do these 3 steps. The first one is audit. And it's audit your calendar, last 2 weeks, and look at it through the lens of energy. What of those things lit you up, lit you on fire, give you energy? And what of those task projects, time you spent, meetings, took energy from you? So highlight in green, highlight in red. And then evaluate each one of those areas from a cost. So $1 sign is things I could pay somebody, $15 an hour to do. And $4 signs is kind of like how expensive is a restaurant. It all depends on what scale you're at. But $1 to $4 signs is paying somebody to do your work, the director or CEO, whatever it is. And then once you look at that and you're like, okay, all the red stuff, all the $1 or $2 sign stuff, that goes into a bucket. And that is the only next hire I make. So I give a very clear, concise, constraint-based strategy to scale that it would be impossible for you to build a business that you grew to hate. And that is the mission I'm on, is I want to help every entrepreneur grow a company they don't grow to hate. So once I got that, then it's transfer. Well, how do I give it to somebody else to do? Right? Because that's like where people are thinking, well, I'm already maxed out and I got to hire someone, they got to train them, all this stuff. My philosophy is called the camcorder method, right? So the process is record yourself doing the thing you do, talk out loud while you're recording it. Like even if you connected to a Zoom meeting by yourself, shared your screen and you're processing your emails or you're going in your financial system, sending out invoices, doing accounts receivable, whatever you're at, posting on social media, just talk it out loud, record it and capture all those different recordings. Then when you go to hire based on that, audit, you give them the videos and say, could you create the SOP, the standard operating procedure, the system from the videos? So now all of a sudden I have somebody that trained themselves, create the SOP in the first week, first few days, and I can tell based on how well it works, did they actually get it? Which is mind blowing. I call it neck time, no extra time. Okay, so I can literally have somebody else train, create an SOP, took nothing from my calendar because I was doing the work while I was doing it. And the last step is fill. And this is, Kenny, this is the one, I know most entrepreneurs, when we get to a level where we actually buy back time. So if you have the extra time, do more of the thing that you make money. So if you're a logo designer, design more logos. If you're in like real estate, go find more deals. But at a certain point, if you get really good at this process called the replacement ladder I teach in the book, then even that is somebody else's responsibility. Right? So it's cool when you get to a point where your calendar, it's like now you're thinking strategically, or what Michael Gerber would call working on the business. What I would argue with people is at that level, this is where we really double down on not just doing more of the things that makes you money, but investing, becoming more. And the more is in areas of skills. Here's where I'm at. Here's where I want to go. What are the skills I need to acquire? Probably need to be better at financial knowledge. I probably need to get Candy stuff. I got to be in some coaching. I got to be a better leader, communicator. I've never really been trained on training other people. So like, how does that work? Is there a course I could take? So that's the skill side. Then there's the beliefs, right? Because at the end of the day, I could teach you how to do Facebook ads, but if you have a belief that everybody that runs Facebook ads are evil people, you're not going to hit go. So what worldviews do you have that are holding you back? Because I think that one of my favorite questions to ask entrepreneurs is, what scares you most about your greatness? Right? If you were to crush it in life right now, what would you fear? Would you fear that you would not have time for your family? Would you fear that you'd be unhealthy because you wouldn't have time to work out? Would you be, and in that space, that belief, that worldview, huge opportunities to unlock growth. And then the other one is character traits, because, you could be the most skillful at something and have incredible beliefs around how this is, money beliefs and abundance and all that stuff. But if you have no discipline, if you have no drive, like these character. I almost look at like a ladder of success, and on the left side skills and then beliefs, and then the character traits are the rungs of the ladder, but it's what locks it in to the person. That's where I would encourage people to go fill. Because if you look at the buyback loop, right, and it really acts as a slingshot, because when it comes around, you're coming back with like all this time and energy and kind of like excitement to be back in the business. But if you don't finish that last part of filling your calendar with things that, you know, light you up, that makes you more money, that invests in yourself, then you don't get that slingshot effect. And all you do is you keep going back and forth between audit, transfer. Okay, I'm overwhelmed. Who do I need to hire? What do I not like doing? What could I pay somebody a little bit of money? Hire that person, be disappointed, be upset, fire that person.
It's like a hamster wheel.
Yeah, it just goes. I meet these entrepreneurs and like, I tried that, it didn't work. It's like, yeah, you didn't work. Like, it ain't the thing.
Yeah.
The top people, the 2%, they do this. You should really study the people at the 2%. What do they believe about life that I don't believe? How are they showing up in the world in a way that's different than the way I'm showing up in the world? You know, when you asked me about my first car, I remember these kids stopped me at a gas station. They're like, you know, rev your engine and, you know, do this. And I was like, cool. And then they always ask, like, what do you do? I know you want to know what I did to buy this car, but what I would love to share with you is what I don't do. Like, here's the deal. I don't drink. I don't party. I don't gamble. I don't stay up all night playing video games. I'm not mean to people. I don't believe the world is out to get me. I don't have a victim mentality. Like, and they're just like, these little kids are like, oh my gosh, you're so serious. How did you make money? I'm like, crypto. And I just leave. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that's a really big idea for people to consider, is like, for you to have more space to do more, you got to say no to the things you're currently doing. Like, literally this year, if you want to grow next year, half of everything you do this year, you just cannot do next year. And you just got to figure out what that half is.
Oh, I love that. And you know, it's so interesting when you talk to people that have achieved a certain level of success in business, you know who's legit and who's a lot of fluff. And I always feel like I can know it because we almost say the exact same things, but just a little bit different, because the principles are all actually the same. Even though there's no playbook, if someone's starting a business or wants to start investing, you can't really give a playbook of what exactly to do, but there are themes that are all similar when you talk to people that have built a certain level of success. And I love how you talked about finding what energizes you, finding what lights you up, do more of what lights you up. Like, it's really simple. Might not be easy, but it's pretty simple, right, to apply. And then I want to stack one thing on top. You might even have this in the book, but I always tell people, once you identify those dollar signs, as you call them, when you really look at what you make over time and you divide that down. So I always tell people, take what you actually make, your net operating income or your salary, whatever your situation is, divide that by all the hours that you actually work. If you can pay someone else to do that job for less than what you're currently doing it, you're a fool to not hire someone. So like cleaning your house, if you can hire someone to clean your house for less than what you make, or it gives you time to free up to do something that you love, that money, it's priceless. The ROI on it is priceless. You can't measure it.
Better than the stock market.
Yeah, absolutely.
Better than index fund. Yeah, and most people don't look at it. I knew I would love this conversation. That's chapter 2 of my book called The Buyback Rate.
There you go.
Well, it's the principle. It's like you said, it's like, these aren't even my original ideas. This is like years and years ago of just like picking up all these, again, success leaves clues. I'm like, what are they doing? How do they think about their time? What beliefs do they have about their self-worth and what they say no to, right? Like what I learned a long time ago is a yes is a no. So if I say yes to something, I'm saying no to a goal or a dream. And if I say no to something, I'm saying yes to the possibility of my goal or dream.
That's right, which is actually really hard to do.
So hard.
I mean, it's hard to eliminate, and I see business owners do this. They don't want to eliminate a product or a service because, well, I made money, but they don't realize that if they took that same effort and doubled down on something else, that they can exponentially grow and probably break through another break point just because of getting so focused on one thing that they do really well.
100%.
So I love that. Who's this for? Is this just entrepreneurs?
You know, what's funny is I wrote it for a very specific entrepreneur. I think, you know, people should write books for a specific person. And it was an entrepreneurial person. What's blown my mind since it's come out, it continues to sell more copies every week than the previous week, which I don't understand how that happens. I love it.
Good.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it because I did spend 2.5 years writing it.
Oh, good.
But I think one of the reasons why is because CEOs are buying it for their executive teams, their directors. Yeah, because like I literally, we teach our team to buy back their time.
Yeah.
Right? It's like to the degree that you figure out how to clean up your calendar, then you have the space to become more, which means if you want that promotion, there's some work to do to become somebody that can lead that higher level of responsibility. So if you're stuck doing 40 hours a week, just doing the work, you don't have time to become more, then that's not going to allow you to develop into the person we need. So we've always taught this framework and teach people how to think and do a time and energy audit. And I think that's what's been really cool is non-entrepreneurs and executives, just high performers that want to just get more out of their day. Because like the empire word scares people. The subtitle of my book's Get Unstuck, Reclaim Your Freedom, and Build Your Empire. But my definition of empire is a life of unlimited creation we never have to retire from. And I want that for everybody.
Yeah. I can totally see that these principles, even if somebody's working in a job or working for someone else or just thinking about love, it's all there. Because even for the mom that's working a job and feels so guilty about having someone clean her house or watch her kids or take them to soccer because she's so exhausted or she wants to pick up an extra shift or do something that really lights her up. Like it's almost like giving people permission to do the things that they really know that they should. They just need somebody to say that you can.
Yeah. Chapter 3 of the book is called Time Assassins. And I wrote down 25 names of people I love, friends of mine, entrepreneurs, successful high performers, athletes. And I said, what beliefs do they have what are the objections? And I just systematically worked on the book and wrote them down and then created this chapter to just talk through this. Cause like, I'll show you how to do it. But if I can't get you to believe that you're worth more, that other people, 80% done by somebody else is 100% freaking awesome.
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean? Like if I can't sell you on these points of view, then you're just going to feel stuck.
Yeah.
So yeah, I worked a lot on the mindset side.
Love that. I have one final question, and we're going to make sure that we link up everywhere of your SaaS foundation, everything that you've got going on, your academy. But I always ask one final question. If you woke up tomorrow and everything that you have built is gone, your academy, the book, the companies, your holding company, everything is gone. You have no money in your bank account. The only thing you get to retain is the information in your head. Nobody knows your name. They're not going to pick up your call just because they know you. You just get to retain the information that you've built and the knowledge that you've built over this two decades of your life and business. What are some of the first things you would do tomorrow to start to build it all back?
First thing I would do tomorrow is find out who has a problem that I can solve with my time. And as soon as I found that person, and I would just dial, I would show up, I would use my feet. Like there's no resource need. I just need to have conversations. And literally as soon as I got somebody that has a problem, I would get them to trust me, take their money, buy back my time. I would literally hire an assistant, first hire, because I want to be spending all of my time talking to customers, delivering value for the customers. And I would communicate the value in a way that I need them to pay up front. See, that's the unique part of what I would think I would do is I would get them to pay up front for 6 months or a year and then take that capital, reinvest it in buying back my time. It's literally chapter 5 of my book. So and then just show up every day to create as much value for my customer more than anybody else in the world. And I think it's just a winning formula.
I love that. It's a great answer. And anyone watching or listening can literally start doing that tomorrow, right? If you want to have more results, double your efforts. And I think that's basically what you're saying.
100%.
When you don't have the resources or any of the other things, it's like you go back to the basics, which is having conversations, acquiring customers, and then basically being able to buy back your time. I love this. Thank you so much for coming on and just sharing all of your knowledge. I think it's going to be massively valuable to our audience. And so I just appreciate you coming out.
It's an honor. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.